Good evening and welcome back to the regular meeting of council. We are resuming at 8:16. If you're at home and you're watching online, not sure why, but if you are at home and you're watching from home, we apologize for the late delay. We had some issues that had to be discussed and dealt with in an in-camera setting. If you're wondering at home why we do go in camera, there are certain issues that may arise in a town, in a municipal government that you can't just necessarily discuss in public. They could be issues that deal with land sales, or legal issues, or labor issues. And sometimes the issues are sensitive enough and that they're early enough that you don't want to do anything to jeopardize them. So there are some discussions that do have to occur away from the public setting. We do apologize. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a couple of happy hours while you're waiting for us to come back. I know I would have. And that brings us, I'll probably get letters about that now. Mr. Vules, we're on item 4, presentations and recognitions. We have none, and that moves us to, sorry, Mr. Legore.
Mr. Mayor, if I could please, I'd just like to recognize Jennifer, who will be leaving the town on employment on the 11th of May. She's going to be going over the mountains, moving to the interior BC. She's been with the town for 10 years now. She's absolutely an outstanding employment. In my 40-plus years municipal government, she is one of the best, and it is a real loss to the town, and we really regret to see her go. We're happy for her future, where she's going, because that's her desire. But she will be thoroughly missed throughout this organization, Jen, and we want to wish you nothing but the best. And very sincerely, we hate to see you leave. Thank you, Jen.
And Jennifer, you know, I've talked to you a lot, and I don't want to make us cry again, but I echo everything that Mr. Legore said. You've been a huge part of my life in politics, and your integrity and professionalism are unbelievable, and I have valued your friendship as well, too, so thank you. We have a delegation tonight, item 5.1, stars, and there we go, thank you. Good evening and welcome tonight. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself after I'm finished, and just remind you that you have a 10-minute presentation time. And I do apologize that you might have thought you were going to be speaking a lot earlier, but again, we had to go in camera for a little while. So thank you for your patience and being willing to come tonight and present to us.
Thank you, Mary. It was my pleasure. It's been a while since I've been able to see your council and bring you an update. We totally planned to do this last year, and the update was by letter. And now we are virtual, so I feel like we are making progress. And so I'm pleased to bring you an update. I want to share my screen. Okay, are you able to see that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Well, I'll get started right away here. So first and foremost, I want to thank the town of Strathmore for continuing to be partners with STARS and for saving lives. COVID-19 has changed all our lives. As a physician-driven organization, STARS' #1 priority is to protect and maintain uninterrupted operations. STARS transport physicians are regarded as experts in critical care. And the reasons why STARS was asked to participate in an international consortium about COVID-19. We created an online portal system for healthcare professionals, and to access airway management, ventilation, and resuscitation procedures. These are stressful times, and we continue to see a rise in stress-related types of missions, including heart attack, stroke, drug overdose, and COVID-related being 13% and as high as 18% of all of STARS missions. Municipalities face countless hardships, which is magnified by the fact that there are many who rely upon you for support, including STARS. Like all organizations, the pandemic has negatively impacted our revenues in all funding streams. When we look at the expenditures, 6% increase in aviation costs reflect the increasing requests for stars. Administration costs show a 3% decrease, but we too suffered the heartache of having to downsize staff members across all 6 of our bases. The pandemic environment has forced us to think outside the box, to be proactive and create positive actions to support our mission. We mobilized and identified operational as well as fundraising efficiencies. The STARS lottery is the single largest funding source for STARS, so we moved forward with the 2021 lottery. And we're indebted to every Albertan who stands by our side as this year's lottery sold out, providing crucial operating funds. STARS site registration revenue has been considerably less, but not surprisingly with the uncertainty of the energy sector. The calendar campaign has significantly decreased with an inability to travel and have a presence in communities. So we have reached out to Urban Alberta municipal partners, and the 2022 calendar will be available at many town offices across Alberta when it launches this July. We pivoted to online events. Many communities hosted online 50-50 raffles in place of their annual community fundraisers that could not be held. With COVID-19 still looming around us, most of our STARS fundraising events have all been canceled for the unforeseeable future. We're thankful and grateful to municipal partners like you who represent unwavering operational support that STARS can rely on. Many are unaware of the multifaceted work that occurs behind the scenes to support rural communities. The STARS Emergency Link Center provides an immediate 24 safety network. And through coordination and access to all available resources, STARS Transport Physicians provide medical guidance on all critical calls, regardless if a patient is transported by fixed wing, ground ambulance, or STARS. Our STARS Transport Physicians orchestrate the complex logistics and facilitate with receiving hospitals. The Emergency Link Center handles over 31,000 emergency requests each year. Let's have a look at a 5-year overview. Overall, in 2020, we have seen increasing missions across the province. This is also the case for the town of Strathmore and Wheatland County. These statistics include critical transfers for when a patient from a scene call may have been taken to the Strathmore Hospital by ground ambulance and now requires rapid transport to tertiary care. This shows a significant increase in critical transfers from Strathmore Hospital, which may include pandemic cases. In some areas, scene calls decreased due to much less travel, but for the town of Strathmore and Wheatland County, scene calls also increased. In 2021, this shows 13 missions, but it's now 15 as we flew twice to Strathmore yesterday. Wheatland County averages an overall total of 33 missions per year, which based on mission-related costs represents about $235,000 annually in service value for your area. Emergencies do not always happen when you're close to home. We all travel, commute for work and recreation. Your partnership with STARS safeguards that your residents have access to STARS here at home as well as across Western Canada. The BK-117 served us well for 35 years, but this new H145 is breakthrough technology. It has increased fuel efficiency, speed, and range. Currently, there are 3 operational from Calgary and Saskatoon, while the third one provides backup. We've received delivery of number 4, 5, and 6, and are waiting for completion of pilot training, which has been delayed due to COVID-19. A new 5-bladed system has been announced with increased lift and load capacity. So number 7 and 8 will be this new system expected to arrive this fall. And then the completion of the entire fleet in 2022. Provincial and federal governments embrace the vision of a fleet. to serve Western Canada, and they provided funding for 7 of the 9 in total helicopters required. And then COVID-19 hit. So far to date, an additional $19 million has been raised from dedicated individuals, corporate sector, and municipalities. There is still a market for the aging fleet, and it will depend on market value and the rate of the US dollar later this year. We anticipate the sale of the previous fleet could generate about $15 million. So our fleet campaign continues with roughly $10 million left to raise. This new technologically advanced intensive care unit environment is currently serving Strathmore residents. With world-class critical care expertise provided by our crew and our STARS transport physicians working behind the scenes, together this results in STARS providing the highest level of emergency critical care available today. Ultrasound is one of the most vital diagnostic tools. Previously, we had ultrasound, but it was not easily transportable. This new handheld ultrasound is a game changer for trauma and heart patients. Blood on board significantly enhances a patient's chance for survival. An iStat delivers invaluable lab results within 2 minutes. The Easy IO drill necessitates emergent IV access under extreme trauma conditions, and of course, with transport physician oversight on every mission. We thank you, Town of Strathmore. Thank you for your leadership and support of STARS. You fly with us on every mission. I had sent a request for your continued support in January, asking your council to renew your previous pledge of support in the amount of $14,000 per year for another 2-year term. Today, the request for STARS continues to rise as we assess communities with the pandemic, in addition to ongoing daily demands. Secure, reliable support for STARS operations is imminent for today, tomorrow, and the future of Strathmore residents. The most important time is now, and with your continued commitment, you are STAR's reason for being. And I thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, and again, thank you for your patience in being able to speak to us. I'm sorry it took a little while for us. Your presentation is at a timely time because now that we're in an election year, we're starting our budgeting discussions earlier than we typically would. So this is a very good time for you to present to us. The information is very good. I know I speak on behalf of all council that we really respect and appreciate and acknowledge the incredible work that the STARS group does and the lives you save. Are there any questions for our presenter or comments from council? No, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Looking for a motion from council? And we will definitely, once we get into our budgeting plan, we will definitely be in touch with your group. But it's Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that we accept the STARS report with gratitude and for information.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And once more, thank you for your presentation. We will consider everything as we begin our budgeting process now.
Well, thank you very much. It's very good to see all of you again. And just to let you know, we did have a formal commemoration presentation for you, but of course, being that we cannot be in person, so I will very much look forward to seeing you at the next update to keep your council well informed and hope to see you in person. But thank you so much for your consideration to continue to be a partner with STARS.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
We have that item 6.2 was dropped from the agenda. Item 6, we have no consent agenda tonight. Item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, adoption of the April 7th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes.
Your Worship. Your Worship.
Deborah?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's actually the adoption of the April 21st, 2021 minutes. There was a typo.
The first one should say that? Thank you. The first one should say April 21st, regular council meetings. My apologies, council. So that's April 21st. And is anyone prepared to make a motion? Thank you, Councillor Corbeil.
I move the council adopt April 21st, 2021 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. 7.2, adoption of the April 21st, 2021 public hearing minutes. Thank you, Mark Pretzlaff. I was dying there. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. I would move the adoption.
That
Of the-
warmed my heart, Mark.
You have to show us what he did of the April 21st public hearing minutes.
Thank you, and God bless Mark Pretzlaff. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We have no tabled items tonight. That brings us to 9 items or reports from administration. 9.1, funding for Brave Park in Lakewood Meadows, which is on page 39. Good evening, Donna, and welcome.
I think it's okay. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. On March 17, 2021, Lakewood of Strathmore approached Town Council requesting a donation and an opportunity to borrow public funds to build a playground called Brave Park in the beautiful up-and-coming community of Lakewood Meadows. Administration met with Lakewood of Strathmore on Tuesday, April 6. During this meeting, administration discussed what funding was required for the park. Lakewood of Strathmore Development has requested a gift of $50,000 from the town of Strathmore. They would like the remaining balance of $133,750 to be a loan from the town of Strathmore that would be repaid over a 3-year time frame. If the town of Strathmore gifts or loans Lakewood of Strathmore Development money, it does set a precedent to other developers, past, present, and future, that the town will donate and/or loan funds for the development of the first playground. It is possible there will be repercussions from past and current developers that the town did not gift funds or loan funds to assist with them developing their first playground. It is not a practice of the town to loan funds. In conclusion, administration does support the park in principle, and we definitely support the concept of the park. However, administration is recommending that council does not loan or donate fund to Lakewood of Strathmore. However, that we support the developer by assisting with grant application and other fundraising opportunities to move the project forward. And thank you, and any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Donna. Questions? Councillor Montgomery and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So question for administration, and not specifically you, Donna. So last year we were told that, and I'm going to be kind of vague about this because I don't remember the exact details, but basically that the town of Strathmore, is kind of has been designated some sort of a rating by, an organization like CMHC or something to that effect, that has basically said that that the town of Strathmore is not really a sound investment for banks, to loan for new housing. Does anyone that's there right now recall or know what I'm talking about?
I don't think so. Administration doesn't appear to. No.
Okay. Okay, because so I'm under the impression that that there's some sort of almost like a blanket credit rating kind of thing that's been applied to the town that makes it tough to for developers to get funds from the bigger banks. So I guess my kind of thoughts revolve around that specifically. So
Let me just follow up on, can I just
Sorry, go
follow
ahead.
up on that, Councillor Montgomery? Has the administration ever heard from any developers saying that they have difficulty receiving loans or funding from bank sources?
No.
Mr. Simpson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we have not. The staff that's here tonight have never heard of that.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, like it was a presentation given by Mr. Justin Rebello last year, where he kind of discussed that. So I guess before I can make a decision or kind of any draw any conclusions, I would need to have I guess if administration could look into what I'm talking about and bring back information about that, because to me it's that does play a role here if that is the case. So if I'm incorrect about what I'm talking about, then I would appreciate clarification if they could do that. Thank you.
So are you saying you wouldn't be prepared to vote on any motion tonight because you need to hear if it's true that developers have difficulty receiving financing in Strathmore?
Yeah, if there's some sort of external forces at play that affect a developer's ability to borrow money to develop their development, I think that I think that's probably something to consider.
So I guess if a motion comes on the floor tonight, when the motion comes forward, that would be the time to discuss or express your lack of support, and that would dictate how you might vote then tonight, I would imagine.
I don't really see anything that's I guess if somebody wanted to make a motion that we go ahead and do those things, I don't see any motions that will be made here, but I guess I'll weigh in later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox, followed by Councillor Sobel, and then Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it was actually, I believe, when we were meeting in the community center that we actually had talked to Ryan Rycroft, and he was the one that brought up the actual possibilities of loaning and so on and so forth. But I'm not in favor of that. I think that we have set a precedent, and I think that maybe we need to be very careful what we say, because Edgefield developer did not build a park, and we did give $50,000 to Edgefield last year.
Didn't we give the money to the school?
We gave it to the park. In order to, and my understanding is we gave it to the park to have naming rights for that park. So my suggestion is that we also give the exact same, and correct me if I'm wrong, that how much money it was, but if we're going to give naming rights to a park in Edgefield, then we should too honor this Brave Park naming and give them the same exact amount of money that we gave to Edgefield, and name that park Brave Park in lieu of our fallen heroes and frontline workers. That's my stance.
Mr. Simpson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our records indicated, and I had it checked through finance, our records indicated the check was made out to the Golden Hills School Division for construction of a playground. I do believe I have seen something to the effect about the naming as well, but I'm not exactly sure how that was all tied together. But the check went to the Golden Hills School Division. Thank you. But as you said, it was for a playground. Edgefield developer did not build a playground. But if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, again, when another playground is needed, the developer will be required, as per our practice, to provide that playground.
I think the distinction here is Edgefield did not provide a playground. George Freeman School wanted a playground, and so they had a fundraising group from their parents. So they fundraised to create their playground for their school. We gave a donation of $50,000 so that we could have the naming rights of that playground. It still remains a school playground. However, they have given permission for the whole of the town to use that. It's on their school property. Mr. Legore.
The whole why we actually decided to give the money was because they were allowing it to be a community playground. And I understand exactly. That's all I'm saying, is if we've given naming rights to that playground, we've already set a precedent. So I do not see why we can't honor the people that have fallen and what COVID has meant to us by also giving to that group and naming it Brave Park. That only makes sense to me. It is a precedent and it's been set, and now we're following it.
Administration, Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Pretzlaff has confirmed your comments that the funds were given to Golden Hill School District for the playground, not to the developer.
Thank you. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would suggest that because it was to the school division, that there was no precedent set in regards to developers. But I did actually want to comment on that because I saw this in the notes of prepared by administration. So it is important to note that there are other concessions made by Golden Hills School Division in addition to giving the town naming rights for Keith Schneider Playground, which was named after our community's longest serving mayor. First, in spite of this playground being on school property, it's clearly a community playground and remains open to the public at all times. Second, and most important, is that the school division accepted the responsibility for upkeep, safety inspections, and eventual replacement of the playground. Traditionally, once a community park is built by a developer, it's turned over to the town, who then accepts responsibility for these noted tasks. This was a really good deal for taxpayers because the school division was going to look after this thing after it was finished. Our hands are clean, and we've got a beautiful community park for a couple, 2 or 3 nearby communities. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple questions because I, like Councillor Cox, did notice that there wasn't a playground in Edgefield. So I'm just wondering, are there policies in place to ensure that, number one, a playground is built within a certain amount of time, or are there parameters on what needs to be included? Because I'm looking at Lakewood Meadows proposal, and I'm seeing that this is above and beyond anything that we've seen a developer do in the past. And so I really like what they put forward as a proposal. And I also like what Councillor Cox is saying, and let's continue the tradition to support them in naming rights. And if this council would decide to support them in their naming of the concept of Brave Park, in principle, I would support that, but I would like to give them a little bit of help. I don't consider this a handout. I consider it a hand up because they are going above and beyond anything that we've seen from a developer anytime in the past. I also think, in light of everything that we've been experiencing with COVID, that we couldn't think of a better time to have a playground built in a community that is up and coming, community that is going to have taxpayers in this community and expansion. Playgrounds do attract people and families, and they also create an amazing setting for parents and grandparents and caregivers to bond with their children, and for children to make new friends in the neighborhood. And so for these reasons, to promote the well-being of our community, which is part of our Town of Strathmore mission, it completely goes with our values, and I would very much support this. Thank you.
I guess my only concern as far as the Lakewood development is they've been in existence for about 8 or 9 years now. And all those residents who first built and moved in with all their families did not get any kind of a playground. And now 9 years later, unfortunately, they're coming to us. And I guess if council doesn't see a distinction between the George Freeman School playground being controlled or being maintained by them afterwards and I think, Mr. Simpson, you did say that Edgefield is still, they still are responsible for putting in a playground in their residential community?
The next playground that goes in there will be, they'll be required to pay for it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go on to Councillor, unless you have something else, Councillor Bauer, did you have any other comments? Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I like the concept of this park. I've said it before, and I think that we shouldn't underestimate the in-kind services that the town is offering. Those are significant, and I think that is something that we haven't necessarily done before, and so that opportunity is something that I think that has considerable value, and speaks to the value of this park and of the concept that they've come up with, and I believe that it is a really, really important concept. I also am mindful of what administration has told us, that if the town of Strathmore gifts or loans Lakewood of Strathmore development money, it does set a precedent to other developers, not just into the future, but also into the past. And, I understand too that, this is a wonderful time to acknowledge that we need outdoor spaces. But it's also the worst possible time because economically, there's just so many pressures now facing all municipalities across this whole country and beyond. And so I think that if we can find a way to assist this community in in-kind support, and we can put together the committees that, with the can-do attitudes that every school does when they build playgrounds, and we can all work together to establish a committee that can bring this forward to recognize and realize this great potential. I'd give every effort available that I have available. I'm a pretty good grant writer. I would do everything in my capacity to support them in their initiatives, and also encourage the town to do everything they could in kind supports. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Just before I go to Deputy Mayor Cox, I just have a question for Mr. Teedy. Where would the $50,000 come from, since we've set our budget for 2021 and we have a 0%? Just that's a little message out to the public. We have a 0% property tax increase this year.
It would either require a borrowing or a transfer from a reserve. The amount is not included in the 2021 budget, but it could possibly, depending on the timing, be included in the 2022 budget if desired.
Okay, and if it was budgeted for 2022, I believe you've told us that about 125,000 equals a 1% tax increase?
It's close to 130,000 now.
Okay.
Would be equivalent to a 1%.
Okay, so unless we did a transfer from reserves, it could impact the property taxes for next year. Okay, Mr. Legore?
That's what I wanted to add, Mr. Chair, that you're talking about close to 0.5% tax increase to cover this cost.
Or a transfer from some reserve. Deputy Mayor Cox, and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can somebody tell me where the 36,000 for the cats came from? because that could be the same place that this 50,000 comes from. I am in no way, shape, or form asking us to do anything for the developers. Maybe a way to look at this would be to approach Lakewood and tell them that they're, or ask them if maybe their homeowners would like to form a small playground society, and we could then gift it to them, or make a donation to them for their playground. Again, I think it's just a precedent that we've already set, that we're naming a park for $50,000. I don't see why we can't name this park for $50,000.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also offer myself, I don't know what I could offer, but to help, or if it was a committee or whatever else, we kind of just, we've seen the financials and we just don't have it. We don't have the kind of money that we can just start handing out, as sad as it is. I am a strong believer and a pusher for mental health and for kids and everything else, and a big advocate right now, but I don't know where we would come up with the money for it. I don't want to start having everybody come, I can see other communities and associations and groups, and everybody is going to need money. And I think if we start, it's going to be a never ending line, I guess. So that's kind of where I'm at. Any in-kind service that we can add, great. But I think we got to be careful.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions for Donna? There's a lot of discussion there, but, and is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Sobel.
Sure, Your Worship. I would move that council not approve the request to provide funds to Lakewood of Strathmore to construct Brave Park Playground in Lakewood Meadows, but does support the concept of Brave Park in principle.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor, so there can be discussion again. Councillor Corbeil, did you want to say anything? Okay. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? I guess seeing, Councillor Montgomery?
Yes, sorry. I just have a question about, I guess it's more procedural, but do we need a motion to not do something?
Typically,
if it gets defeated, does that mean that we're approving funding?
Typically, a motion is done in the positive.
Yeah, because like I said, if it gets defeated, does that mean that we're agreeing to fund it?
No.
I'm getting some direction here from Jennifer, I hope.
Your Worship, actually, administration agrees with Councillor Montgomery that a motion in the negative is kind of not normal procedure. Perhaps council could just accept the presentation for information and not act on it.
We could revisit it, is that what you're saying later? Or?
You could
No.
just accept it for information, or alternatively, you could pass a motion to inform the developers of council's decision to not fund the park.
Councillor Sobel.
I stand to be corrected on this, but I understood that there was a lot of confusion and discussion on this. I remember this long discussion years ago, and it was ultimately decided that you can do a negative motion. There's nothing that stops you from doing a negative motion, but I'm at administration's command. I'll alter my motion if you feel it's the point is, are we going to fund the project or not at this time? And because there's a request, I think it should be clear and an unfettered response, and that's why I didn't really have a problem with this motion, because it is very clear. And I don't think that if this is voted against, that that we necessarily agree to fund it. We would need another motion to put in a financial amount and how we're funding this. My opinion only.
Thank you.
Jen, I see to you.
Jennifer?
Your Worship, I think the problem is in the wording of the motion. The motion perhaps could read that council deny the request instead of does not approve. It's really in the wording, Your Worship. That would be a friendly amendment.
And then if that were to pass, then a councillor would be able to still bring forward a motion to fund a project like this, or do they have to have a notice of motion for? Okay. All right, thank you. So, Councillor Sobel, do you want to adjust your wording?
I'm happy to amend my motion to say that council deny the request to provide funds to Lakewood of Strathmore to construct Brave Park Playground in Lakewood Meadows, but does support the concept of Brave Park in principle.
All right, thank you. So we have that amended or adjusted motion on the floor. Is there further discussion on that? Seeing none, I guess I'll call the motion. All in favor of the motion on the floor? And opposed? And the motion is carried 5-2.
Your Worship, if I might, I would still appreciate if administration could look into the records and see if there's if they have any information about what I was referring to, just for general information. So, and if I need to do that in the form of a motion, or if they can, if they need like a administrative inquiry or something like that.
Do you need administrative inquiry then from Councillor Montgomery? Okay. Yeah, if you would, yeah, they'll bring it forward. You want Councillor Montgomery? Councillor Montgomery, if you could write up an administrative inquiry just to bring forward tonight, later?
Sure, thank you.
Since it's come up through this discussion. All right, thank you, Donna. And that brings us to 9.2, the revised recreational use of Strathmore and Kinsman Lakes policy, which is on page 52. Good evening, Mark.
Hello, Your Worship and Council. I'm here to speak to a revision to policy number 7205, recreational use on Strathmore Lakes and Kinsman Lake. If council recalls, this motion was presented in March and was approved by council, which provided some governing recreation use on Strathmore and Kinsman Lake. After the policy was approved, administration had been in contact with the Calgary Model Sailing Association, CMSA, and they had indicated that the policy would restrict some access of their boats by their members. Accordingly, administration revised the policy to speak about the boat size and how they're propelled. Within the report and is within the policy that was attached, council can see the small changes what relates to size and the power of how the boats are propelled. If there's any questions, I'm glad to ask or answer.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have one question, if I could kick it off. Normally I wait a while, but hey, I got the question. Could you explain to council and the public who are watching the difference between why a kayak would be not approved and a canoe would be approved?
Yeah, Your Worship, administration felt that the act of getting into a kayak would require that somebody may have to be in direct contact with the water. It's obviously, it's a challenge for anyone to, well, at least for myself, to remain upright in a kayak. And so the likelihood of somebody either walking into the water to get on into a kayak or tipping over would then have direct access or direct contact with the water, which is ultimately what we're trying to, this policy addresses in some aspect.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mark, just a question, because paddle boards are not indicated specifically. And I have been approached by someone that's stated that in their opinion, they are very, very good and do not hit the water. What is stopping them from going on a paddleboard? So that concerns me because it doesn't specifically state paddleboards. And kayaks, I totally get what you're saying about contact, but a lot of kayakers actually will get in their kayaks before they even get in the water. So they could also do that without touching the water. And so could a paddleboarder. So it concerns me that we're not being specific enough. I mean, lots of people I know have flipped kayaks too. Or canoes, sorry. So if we're going to say no to kayaks and paddleboards, I think we need to say no to canoes as well.
Through the chair, Councillor Cox, the administration felt that the act of getting into the water and onto a paddleboard would require that somebody make contact with the water, and that's why it wasn't specifically mentioned as opposed to kayaks. But if that's something that council feels needs to be amended in here, we can definitely address that as well.
Well, like I'm saying, I mean, I river kayak and I don't get in the water. I get in on the shore and I literally push myself down the hill into the water. And paddleboard, same thing. You can push yourself off the beach from a standing position. You're not touching the water. I mean, your feet could go into a canoe to get into a canoe because it has to be floating. I mean, I don't know. I'm preparing you for people being on that lake in a paddle or on a paddleboard because you haven't said it's not allowed.
Is it council's wishes that you want to make some amendments to the policy and have it come back to us? Do you want to suggest amendments to administration and have it come back to us at a later time? Mr. Legore?
I'm just concerned that it's not detailed enough that we are going to cause that there will be people on it in paddleboards right beside somebody in a canoe because that's been allowed and it doesn't specifically state that paddleboards aren't. How are you going to enforce that? I don't know. These are just my opinions and what has been brought to me. So whatever all of council decides, I'm fine with, but I just want them to be prepared.
Mr. Legore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, while we don't have any motion on the floor yet, we should deal with the policy amendment that's being proposed by Mr. Pretzlaff. If council wants to make a subsequent motion that you look at allowing kayaks on there, we'll do that and we'll bring that forward as a separate item and you can have your discussion because there are risks associated with that, as Mr. Pretzlaff states, and it may open the door to further use of the park as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Legore, following up on that, what does the town do, or what does the town assume as far as liability risks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have liability with storm ponds, and what we're trying to do by having a policy is mitigate our risks with the use of the storm ponds. Many communities ignore it, but that does not alleviate the liability from it. So what we're trying to do, and this is in discussion with legal counsel as well, you're trying to mitigate your risk by controlling the use of the storm pond.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to two other councillors who have their hand icons up. Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Peterson.
I just wanted to mention that in clause 2.2, it does mention stand-up paddleboarding specifically, and kayaking as well, and scuba diving and water skiing and board sailing. I mean, like I noticed that, at the front of the policy itself, it does say that, that we don't guarantee the safety at all and use it at your own risk. I personally, and this is the comments I made when we looked at this before, I personally would rather see things like kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding be allowed. I think it's enough to say that you use the water at your own risk, and I think, anyways, that's all I was going to say, is that it is in there specifically, and I agree with Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Your worship, I was going to move that council approve the revised policy number 7205, recreation use of Strathmore and Kinsman Lakes as presented. And if I just might speak to the motion, your worship?
Yes.
In terms of kayaking and paddleboarding and so on, I think what this serves to do is recognize that there's limited recreational use of a storm pond. This isn't a river or a freshwater lake, it's a storm pond. And that carries with it certain issues and difficulties that one doesn't experience. And I know I have a great passel of grandchildren who will love this policy and will utilize it. I can tell you I don't want them on a paddleboard, although that will be their inclination. And as good as they are, I certainly don't want them paddleboarding on a storm pond. So I really appreciate the way this this policy is put together. I think that it makes the best of both worlds, and I think it is going to speak to what Councillor Corbeil has said before about the need for increased levels of recreation in our community. It's going to offer that, and if ever there is a time when we can mitigate the storm flow to these ponds and have millions of dollars to be able to circumvent it and make them into lakes, that'll be a wonderful time. But until then, they're storm ponds, and it's not good to have people in the water. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Is there further discussion from councillors on the motion that's been put on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? So the motion carries 5-2. Thank you, Mark, for your time, and thank you for administration's time and your time in crafting this policy and coming forward tonight in the presentation.
You're welcome, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to 9.3, the waiving of certain business license fees, page 61, and Mr. Teedy is presenting. Welcome back, Mel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council considered this issue in January of this year. At that time, administration was to bring back this issue to Council if circumstances changed. With the continued health restrictions imposed on restaurants, gyms, barbershops, and the like, this sector of the economy is very much at risk. Administration is recommending that the business license fees for the businesses listed in this report be waived for 2021 as a sign of support for these businesses. Based on 2020, administration estimates that the waiver would apply to approximately 90 businesses in 2021, and the loss of revenue would be approximately $9,000. Administration proposes that this loss of revenue be funded by a transfer from the General Administration Reserve. This concludes my comments on this report, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teedy. Questions for Mr. Teedy from Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you. Actually, I was ready with a motion, but if Councillor Corbeil was going to do that, I can defer to her. Okay. I'll move the council authorize administration to waive 2021 business license fees for restaurants, gyms, fitness studios, personal training services, barbers, shops, hair salons, beauticians, nail salons, and that the revenue shortfall from this initiative be funded by the General Administration Reserve.
Thank you for the motion. And did you want to speak to it at all, Mr. Montgomery? Councillor Montgomery?
I just want to say, thanks for administration for bringing this forward. I think it's great. I think we should be trying to mitigate as much damage as possible. And I hope that this will, it's something small, but I hope, I hope every little bit helps. So, and kudos to administration again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments from councillors as far as, did you want to be heard on the motion, Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Corbio?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just am so grateful that administration has done this, and I think that it's not so much the amount, Your Worship, as it is the fact that we can say to these small businesses that we recognize that you're suffering, that you're really suffering, and that we're trying to have your back in some small way. But it also, I think, can lend itself to some greater creativity among the councillors that sit here and people in community as to other things that we can do to help these groups mitigate the losses that they've suffered, and whether that be advocating for them at the federal and provincial level, utilizing RMA and AUMA to promote additional services to these identifiable groups, or to simply work within our own community in a creative fashion to encourage the increased businesses and process business to them once this COVID crisis starts to abate. I am extremely grateful to administration for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Corbio?
Thank you, Your Worship. I am also grateful that this is brought forward. I have a question, though. A lot of these places have probably already paid for their business license fee. What happens now?
Subject to this motion being passed, administration will refund the fees to the types of businesses listed as a result of this motion.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have two questions. So would this also include one-on-one or home-based businesses? And I am worried that we may have forgotten someone in this list. And so on the back, I did read that one of the implications of this motion might be that other classes of businesses that have not closed may also request waiving of the business license fee. I'm wondering perhaps if we could say that other classes of businesses that have closed could also request in writing the waiving of their business license fee in case we may have overlooked someone.
Yes, that information was contained in the report. I just did not verbalize it during my presentation.
About the home-based businesses?
The home-based businesses are included in the 90 that we counted from last year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from councillors? Then I will call the vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Teedy. And thank you for all your work on this and your care and consideration for those businesses, to you and your staff. That brings us to 9.4, citizen complaint regarding Councillor Sobel Facebook post. Jennifer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration is recommending to council that council postpone this matter until the May 19th, 2021 council meeting.
Thank you for that recommendation. Do you need a motion at all? Okay, so we'll need a motion from Deputy Mayor Cox.
Your Worship, I believe there was two parts to this motion, was there not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we just need to refer to the May 19th meeting. The rest of it has been dealt with already.
Okay. So I move that we table this item to the May 19th council meeting.
Yes, that's correct. That's the correct wording you'd be looking for. Any discussion on the motion presented by Deputy Mayor Cox? Councillor Corbeil, did you have a comment? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bauer? Your image is on the screen, move around, and then I don't know where to look. It's just a logistics thing. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and I'll call it all in favor. And the motion is carried. Item 10, committee reports. 10.1, reports from councillors from committees on which they sit. Councillor Sobel?
Excuse me. I have two reports, Your Worship. The first one is in regards to the Chamber of Commerce, who held their virtual annual general meeting on April 29th. There were 17 chamber members in attendance. Reports from Chair Haley Poirier and Executive Director Sean Kissling were read into the minutes, and a treasurer's report was received and approved. This will be posted on the Chamber's website, which is strathmorechamberddistrict.com. This AGM is also an opportunity to welcome new directors into the Chamber's Board of Directors to fill vacancies arising from past directors being unable to volunteer for another term. This year, there were 5 vacancies, and all 5 nominees were unanimously voted in as new directors. They are Michelle Bouchard of Connect First Credit Union Limited in Strathmore, Heather Dougal of Royal LePage Benchmark in Strathmore, Betty Jane Jansen of Rosebud Country Inn, Pie Shop and Eatery in Rosebud, Eliza Maxwell of Hidden Secrets in Strathmore, and Kyle Gerhardt of Origin Malting and Brewing in Strathmore. With these additions, the Chamber's board is strengthened and now operates with 13 board members at the table. The Chamber also held a regular board meeting earlier today, actually, and elected a new executive committee. Chamber bylaws do not allow a director to hold a chair position for more than 2 years. Haley Poirier had held that position for 2 years, and while ineligible for the chair position, was welcomed to the executive committee in the immediate past chair position. However, no nominations for the chair position were received, and as such a motion was made to have Ms. Poirier continue to fill the chair's position in an acting capacity until such time as another director is nominated or until the next AGM. The motion passed. There was 1 nomination for vice chair, and the board welcomed new director Betty Jane Jansen into that position. Michael McCutcheon was also nominated and voted in for the treasurer's position. And my second committee in regards to the Traffic Advisory Committee, their educational project, which involved placing creative and traffic-related slogans on a signboard, commenced May the 1st, and the sign is located at George Freeman Trail and Edgeview Road, and those are my 2 reports, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 brief reports. One is from Marigold Library. Marigold had held their AGM a week ago. They remain in a solid financial position. The minutes and the budget are included in this agenda report. The current Marigold Library building has been listed with a real estate company, and evaluation was carried out in December of 2020, and they've had lots of interest in the building, so that's good. The new building is on track to open in August of 2021. And the project remains within or under budget in all areas, and less than 1% of the contingency has been accessed at this time. Please find attached in the agenda the Strathmore Library Services value of your investment document. I think it's probably the most important document that Marigold gives to its communities, because it speaks very specifically to what you get for the money that we pay per capita for the Marigold Library Services. And it's extensive, and certainly in COVID, the services that municipal libraries have provided is been more important than ever. As the town of Strathmore representative to Marigold, I accepted reappointment to their governance committee, their advocacy committee, and I stayed on the Marigold WID building committee. Seniors Advisory is bringing forth a request to council to consider 2 resolutions for AUMA, and we're hoping that those will be in front of council for your consideration by May, because they have to be sent to AUMA by the end of June. And I would just like to also thank Deborah Hammerlock for her assistance and consideration to the Seniors Advisory Committee. She does a great job for us, for the town, and for the committee. And to Jen Swatsky and Erica and her team for the assistance in lining out the resolutions. That's all I have, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other council committee reports? I see we have yours in writing, Councillor Bauer from Emergency Management Advisory Board. Is that correct? Just at the back of our agenda. Good, thank you. Any other reports from councillors? Then I'm looking for a motion to accept these. Councillor Sobel?
I would move that the council accepts these reports for information purposes, Your Worship.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. I'll call the motion. All in favor? That motion is carried. We have no, item 11, items directly related to council. I think we have anything there. Item 12, bylaws. 12.1 bylaw number 21-16, tax rate bylaw. Mr. Teedy is speaking to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. The basis of the tax rate bylaw has two components. The first is the property assessment roll. In this case, the assessment roll has decreased by approximately $20 million from $1,945 million to $1,925 million from the prior year, a decrease of approximately 1%. The second component is the budget approved by council for the 2021 year. The total of the municipal portion of the taxation contained in Bylaw 21-16 is the same amount as the 2020 at $12,948,000. As a result of the decrease in taxable assessment, the mill rate increases by 0.068 of a mill, or approximately 1%, to offset the decreases in property assessments. The total taxation provided for in this bylaw has decreased by $171,000, or nearly 1%, compared to 2020. If a tax rate bylaw can be good news, then this bylaw is good news, a good news story for the community. The property taxes are approximately 1% lower this year than last. The town of Strathmore is the collection agent for the province of Alberta and Wheatland Housing Management Body. Approximately a third of the total property tax is remitted to the province and Wheatland Housing. Attached to this report is a comparison of 2020 mill rates throughout the province of Alberta. Strathmore has a mill rate slightly less than the average of the 17 communities listed in this report. Erie, Chestermere, Calgary, Cochrane, and Okotoks have the lowest mill rates in the province. The highest on this list is Leduc, Brooks, St. Albert, Camrose, and Lethbridge. Subject to the passing of this bylaw, we anticipate the mailing of the tax notices will take place within a week. Last year, many towns and cities, including the town of Strathmore, amended the due date for property taxes. Administration is not currently aware of any communities in the province delaying the due date or penalty date for 2021 property taxes. Just anecdotally, administration has received only 2 inquiries recently about ending tip payments compared to 2020, when there was a significant movement towards ending monthly tip payments. Delaying a due date for property taxes this year would cause uncertainty as to cash flow for the town and would necessitate in a working capital borrowing bylaw with its associated interest costs, which is not included in the 2021 budget. The town needs certainty as to cash flow. This concludes my comments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Teedy. Are there any questions for Mr. Teedy? Councillor Peterson?
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Deputy Mayor Cox, then Councillor Montgomery?
Actually, Councillor Montgomery was ahead of me.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just ready to make a motion, so
Thank you.
go ahead.
Councillor Cox, or Deputy Mayor Cox, do you have a question, or were you thinking of a motion too?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can discuss after the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Montgomery, do you want to make your motion then?
Sure. I will move that we extend the meeting till 10:30.
Thank you. We have a motion to extend the meeting to 10:30. And thank you for making that motion. I was about to.
Yeah, you reminded me, so.
You've all heard his famous motion. All in favor? Thank you. And now, Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. I'll move the council give first reading to bylaw number 21-16, 2021 tax rate bylaw.
Thank you. We have a motion for first reading. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Councillor Corbeil?
I move the council give second reading to bylaw number 21-16, 2021 tax rate bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. Now that we have a motion for second reading, is there discussion? I think Deputy Mayor Cox, you had a couple comments.
Yes, please. If I could ask a question or make a comment. I totally understand, Mr. Teedy, that it would be detrimental to the town to defer any of those taxes. But we still have, or we can still make that consolation if there is somebody that does come forward that's in dire straits.
Administration, do you know if there's, I think Deputy Mayor Cox is asking if there is any discretion on property taxes if someone is in dire financial situation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we received requests and had to defer property taxes, council would end up in a borrowing situation, so we had sufficient funds to get us through. Mr. Teedy, do you want to add anything to that?
No, other than it's important that we retain certainty with respect to our cash flow.
Thank you. Does that help, Deputy Mayor Cox, on that question?
Yeah, I just, so there's no discretionary at all on that. What if somebody wanted to make some kind of a payment arrangement? Do we do that kind of concept?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if someone come to us who was in dire straits and wanted to look at some type of payment arrangement, we would certainly be willing to talk to them and see what we can do to help them out.
Thank you. That was all I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cox. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question for Mr. Teedy, please. You've stated in your report summary that property values have decreased $20,000 over the past year and then $12,000 in 2019. I would surmise that that is because of the situation that Alberta has been in. And I'm wondering, with a little bit of an uptick in property sales and housing starts, do you anticipate that that number could be more at par with what we've seen before that, and that there would be an opportunity that we would be able to decrease the mill rate in the future?
The 20 million and the 12 million are as of July 1st this past year and the prior year. It's not as of right now. And so as the economy improves, yes, certainly real estate, particularly in the city, has moved ahead significantly, I understand. Strathmore has always been lagging to trends in the city, and so we anticipate that, yes, the property values will move, but perhaps somewhat more modestly than the city has experienced very recently in the real estate market.
Thank you, Mr. Teedy.
Thank you. Any other discussion points? Seeing none, we have a motion for second reading on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
I would move that council give unanimous consent to third and final reading of bylaw number 21-16, 2021, tax rate bylaw.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And Councillor Montgomery.
I'll move the council give third and final reading to bylaw number 21-16, 2021 tax rate bylaw.
And thank you for that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Teedy, again. And that brings us to 12.2, bylaw number 21-07, off-site levy bylaw, April 2021. And Ethan, welcome this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight in seeking second and third reading of bylaw 2107, off-site levy bylaw. Our current bylaw is 6 years old, and as such, a lot of the information is now out of date or no longer applicable. Because of this, the levy funds collected cannot be used for the projects the town needs due to new development. Off-site levies are the mechanism which allows the town to complete projects which allow development to occur without taxes being raised on existing residents. The rates provided in bylaw 2107 will see a marginal increase of about $2,500 per house on new builds, an increase which is expected to be less than 1% of a standard new home. Also included with this bylaw are new requirements for administration to provide an annual update to council that would help avoid this 6-year lapse, and as well as the updated payment terms which we are proposing, which are mutually beneficial to both the town and the developers. I would like to thank council for their time on this important bylaw, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And before I go to Councillor Peterson, a quick question for you, Ethan, maybe for the public at home. You had consultations with developers, and maybe you could just quickly explain that little process.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We have had consultation with developers on multiple occasions. This was also advertised publicly in the newspaper for 2 weeks, which we received 0 responses. But yes, we have consulted with both developers and given everyone else the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I'm prepared to move that council give second reading to bylaw number 21-07, off-site levy bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have that motion for second reading, is there further discussion? Deputy Mayor, sorry, did you want to speak to the motion, and then I'll go to...
If I could just speak to it very briefly, Your Worship. One of the things that Mr. Wilson told us when he first introduced this was that from the outset, his goal was to ensure that the process was transparent and that the external stakeholders had input throughout the entire process. And I just want to really reinforce that the methodology is really sound, and that in the last statement, in the conclusion on the notes in this, there is a sentence that says vital details are provided within the schedules in the bylaw, which are not only controls on how the levies are collected, but how the levies are spent. This is a departure, and it's such a very important point. And I just would encourage anyone that had any concerns or questions around this, that they look to this document, this bylaw 21-07 on offsite levy bylaws, so that they have full understanding of the methodology that was utilized in creating this. And I'm really glad to see it in front of council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Cox, then Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the concept of this bylaw update is needed, and it probably should have been done in a little bit sooner. I just think, and I will not support this bylaw as it's written, as I think that it will stop some of the development in Strathmore. And as we all know, it doesn't matter how many houses in town sell, they aren't increasing our property tax base. but a developer that's selling lots, that's building new houses, is how we will increase our tax base. And I believe you can go around, you can say $2,500, but that totally depends on the cost of the lot. It totally depends on a number of things. And I believe that we are already in a place where the fact that building houses is going to cost triple that it did, 6 months ago. And we're just starting to get some momentum going. I mean, in all of last year, we only sold 13 new builds, I believe. We're already probably past that, and it's only May. So I seriously think that the concept of what this represents is great. I just think that the increase is too high and too much all at once. I would be in favor of this bylaw if the increase was gradual over the next couple of years maybe or something, but to hit them when the going is just starting to come back, I'm not in favor.
Thank you for that. Ethan, if I could ask you, in your discussions with developers, can you comment on what their feelings were as far as this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I mentioned this the last time I was up here. Developers aren't in favor of any increase, of course, and I totally understand that from a business perspective. The bylaw brought forward is trying to achieve a happy medium. We know that this bylaw does not propose the rates which the report says that we should be charging. So we've tried to find a number which works for both the town and the developers.
Would you mind just referring to the number that was recommended in the report and what we decided upon as a group?
Put me on the spot, but yep.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it would demonstrate to the public that we're trying to find a compromise, we're trying to meet the developers, and we're trying to not have a huge impact on them and future development.
Yes, Your Worship. So I've found it here. The rates which are proposed in the report range between $151,000 and $206,000, depending on where in the town that development would be. The bylaw as such is proposing a rate that starts at $113,000 and only goes up to $168,000. The way we are proposing that this is achieved is that both water and transportation projects are supplemented by 30%.
Just to clarify, was there a figure of 5,000 originally presented to us and we changed it to 2,500?
If we use the rates which are in the report, that is approximately $5,000 per lot in additional costs. As noted, the costs within the bylaw as written is about $2,500 per lot.
Okay, so thank you. So we basically cut in half what the report on offsite levies brought forward to us.
Compared to current, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. And thank you very much on this. I struggled partly because, obviously, as Councillor Cox or Deputy Mayor Cox mentioned, I hate the idea of putting more burden on, on developers and people that are, trying to make stuff happen here. And as Mayor Fuel just mentioned, there was, kind of, a compromise made in the amounts. And so I am glad that we've kind of, reduced it a bit. I struggled mainly, not because of the extra $2,500 per house, but actually just due to the fact, the timing. As everybody knows, the cost of wood has gone up about, 80,000% or, something like that. So, the price of a house is already, it's already skyrocketing right now. And so at the same time, I recognize that the previous bylaw was outdated. It wasn't, funding the reserves that we needed. It was kind of covering projects that are no longer even on the table. So for those reasons, I do support this. But as I said, it was a struggle for me mainly just because of the extra headwinds that this industry is already experiencing. And Yeah. So I guess, yeah, thank you very much, Ethan. I appreciate your work on this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. I have Councillor Bauer, followed by Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Ethan, for your continued work on this and also taking suggestions from council and weaving it into this bylaw. Unfortunately, I'm not able to support this bylaw as it stands. I still think that has more room for compromise between the developers and the town. I understand that it's been 6 years that this has not been looked at, but I don't think now is the time to bring this up, especially when right now we have, as Councillor Cox just said, many building permits are being granted, and we do rely on our developers so much in order to sell those houses to bring in more people. I did initially do some research, and I had looked at the proposed before, but Ethan, my question for you, the proposed levies before would have put Strathmore higher than Chestermere at about $165,000 a hectare. What this proposal that's in front of us, do you know what the difference is?
Your Worship and Councillor Bauer, the proposed rates within the bylaw now keep us under Chestermere's maximum in all areas of Strathmore. So Chestermere also has a varying rate throughout their city. This would keep us below their maximum. If I'm going off of memory here, but I believe their maximum is about $205,000 per hectare. And so our proposed rate here would keep us below that by a significant amount, actually.
At which amount is that?
So that what's proposed
per hectare?
Per hectare, yes. So we're proposing a rate, but between 113 and 168,000. So our 168 being our maximum is well below Chestermere's maximum of about 205,000.
Okay. I'm just really struggling. I remember hearing that Langdon had lowered their, like Rocky View County had lowered their rates, their offsite levies for Langdon, and now they're selling homes. So I'm just wondering if this proposed change in levies is just too much. So I'm really struggling with this. I just worry that with the other reasons that the other councillors have mentioned, I just don't know if this is time for such a significant increase. So I'm struggling.
Thank you.
But thank you.
I have Mr. Simpson and then Ethan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we don't want to lose the bylaw. Would it please council if we looked at a 2-year increase to get to this number that we're talking about tonight? Would that help with council moving forward with the bylaw? We really need to move forward with the bylaw, and I think a 2-year transition would make it easier for the developers, and we'd be certainly pleased to get this bylaw approved and move forward.
I would be willing to accept that, Your Worship. I think that if you phase it in for 2 years, then that allows development to continue. It's not going to bind the developers as much, and it allows them to see it coming and prepare for it as well. I just think hitting them with this right now would not be mutually beneficial to us. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Simpson. Administration, if I could turn to you, do we need to do anything as far as wordsmithing in the bylaw to show the phased-in approach of the 2,500?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest further to Mr. Simpson's comments is that council make a motion that the bylaw be referred to administration to be phased in over 2 years. Vote on that motion, and then we will bring the bylaw back to you with a phasing increase over 2 years.
So then just for clarification, would we do that on the third and final reading motion or add that as a separate motion?
I would do it even before we do second reading, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if I could turn back to who did the motion for second reading? Who had that motion? Councillor Peterson?
Yes, Your Worship. So I'm prepared to withdraw the motion. But I have a question relevant to the 2-year phase in. I know that when Ethan presented before, and it's in his report again today, that there's a 3-year payment term, right? Is there not, that the developers can utilize? So that just want to ensure that people understand that the developers can take 3 years to pay. And the other question that I have is what is the impact to budget, to overall budget, if we do a phased in process?
To Your Worship and Council, thank you. A couple of things here I'd like to mention. So, of course, the details within the bylaw, not necessarily just the rate, are very important. So, as Mr. Simpson said, we very much would like to continue moving this forward. As far as cash flow or budget, as you've asked, Councillor Peterson, all of these projects are built as needed. So development will decide when they are to be built. Of course, anything less than what is in the ISL report will have to be, any shortfall covered through taxation. So the bylaw as presented has that. We would only be increasing that by a slight amount based on a lower rate. I also have a couple of other rates available if council wishes. One is a slightly smaller increase of about $1,500 per lot, and a third is an increase of about $800 per lot if that matches council's desires.
So council, you have an opportunity then to either look at a phased approach or decide upon a lower rate, I guess, as far as the bylaw is concerned, as far as the rate per lot.
So Your Worship, I'm prepared to move that council-directed administration to take the offsite levy bylaw back to the drawing board and return to council in a timely fashion with a 2-year phased-in approach.
Just for clarification, you're rescinding your original motion for second reading?
In the motion, yes.
And you have this new motion to come back to us. And if I could ask a question to Mr. Simpson and Ethan, is May 19th still okay for that?
Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Peterson, because I confuse easily, could you restate your second motion?
So at the behest of administration, so I would move the council direct administration to rewrite or relook at the offsite levy bylaw and come back to council on May the 19th with alternatives to the current proposal, such as a 2-year phased-in approach and any other suggestions that they may feel useful or pertinent. And if I might add, Your Worship, it doesn't need to be a part of the motion.
I just wanted to wish Deborah good luck getting that all down.
She's good. But if they're not a part of the motion, Your Worship, but to speak to it, if we could also have those any tax implications that might be attached to that. I know that Ethan said that they're small, but boy, we're running close to the wire as it is. So if there are such, if they could be attached. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion, a new motion on the floor. Councillor Deputy Mayor Cox.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, but I thought that we were trying to move it forward tonight, but we just wanted that phased in approach. But now
I just checked with him and he said that they'd be okay having this come back on May 19th.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bauer, did you have a comment?
I do, Your Worship. I just wish to leave one more comment for administration. Is it possible when you're looking at the phasing in the increase over a couple years, would it also be okay to look at the projected growth during that time and perhaps weigh it more heavily on the second year rather than the first? The reason I'm thinking about that is we don't want to have, we don't want to impede projected growth this year by bringing in a levy, and this allows a little bit of time for developers to know what's coming, especially, like, I understand that south of the road, the cost per hectare is only 113, but we don't have a lot of development happening south of the road. Right now, we have it in the northeast and northwest. So the cost to develop that land is going to be greater. So I just would like to just leave that in your hands, your very capable hands. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. We'll take that into consideration. And the reason I suggest it comes back to administration is we want to make sure we get the correct numbers in the bylaw that we bring forward. So we don't want to be guessing or just saying over a 2-year period. So we'll come back sort of with the same bylaw, but with numbers for a 2-year phase-in period.
Thank you. Thank you, Ethan. So we have that motion on the floor. I'll call the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and efforts on this. And we look forward to hearing again on May 19th. I don't believe we have urgent business tonight. So that brings us to question. Item 14, questions between councillors and or council statements. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I just wanted to mention that the Strathmore Overnight Shelter was very grateful to all the support they received from council and from the town in their March for Shelter. And they also, Strathmore Overnight Shelter has been one of 6 recipients of the 2021 Scots Canada Grow for Good program. So they have began an innovative project to do a garden, quite a large garden, focused on offering healthy food to clients, but also others in need in the community. And they're focused on providing learning opportunities for clients. And finally, SOS, the garden will offer a space for fellowship for clients and community members. And if anybody wants to be a part of that, they are most welcome to connect with the Overnight Shelter on Facebook or on the StrathmoreOvernightShelter.com. And I really appreciate the community support that has come forward through that as well, especially with the compost that we've been able to get at no charge through Waste Management. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Sobel, then Councillor Montgomery, and then Councillor Bauer. Councillor Sobel, you didn't have anything? I thought I saw your hand, but that's okay. So I'll go to Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I just had a question for administration. And I guess, something I raised earlier this evening, but I guess I'll raise it again. So I had that idea earlier about, looking at developing the wetlands a bit more as far as like putting pathways in and benches and some kind of lookouts and stuff like that, maybe some trees. And I'm just wondering from administration what the best way would be to get more information from administration on that. Like, would you want an admin inquiry, or should I do a notice of motion or something like that?
Your Worship, if I might speak to that, remember when in our last council, there was a proposal that came forward around that. And I remember speaking to Tom Sadler, our resident wetlands expert, and he talked about exactly what you're talking about. And there was actually a proposal that was drawn up with the town to do exactly what you're talking about. And it talked about putting a boardwalk across the wetlands And Tom Sadler would say that what we have there is not a wetland. It's a contrived environment that would be the most ideal, situated ideally to teach people about wetlands. And so Tom Sadler, by the way, developed the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary Plan and the Frank Lake one as well. And so he had a lot to do with that. And he talked about building the boardwalk over and doing the plan, how you could attract birds, how you could do sight seeing processes on that pathway, and make it a very much an outdoor education project. And so that is somewhere. I saw the plans, but I don't know where they are in our archives.
So, Councillor Peterson, are you saying that administration might look into this and see if they can find a plan?
Yeah, I wonder if we have it somewhere still. I think it was from 2014.
Okay, I do not know the answer to that. They appear confused too. So do you think, Jennifer, as a question along those lines, Councillor Montgomery's got some questions he'd like to raise as far as future improvements to that wetland park. Is the best avenue an administrative inquiry or a notice of motion?
Your Worship, administration recommends an administrative inquiry.
Okay, thank you. Does that help, Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to announce that tomorrow, Councillor Montgomery and I are speaking virtually with the Girl Guides of Strathmore. They came to us through Councillor Deputy Mayor Cox and asked for representatives to hear their pitch on how they would like to have a bike rack and a bike repair station at the town hall location. And so tomorrow, Councillor Montgomery and I will be explaining the process to them and hopefully bringing this back to council, either with them as a delegation or with one of us presenting to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Then we'll move on to 15, administrative inquiries. Deborah is ready for these. 15.1, administrative inquiry response regarding the anti-racism policy. We're good. Any comments or questions from councillors on that one?
I do, Your Worship.
Councillor Sobel?
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank Mark and Pretzlaff and Catherine Walsh for putting this information together. It's very, very helpful. And once again, this is as a result of the Strathmore and Siksika relationship that is focusing on racism. And in our subcommittee, which is the sports one, I wanted to gather some of this information first. So one of the things I've noticed is I have a couple of this policy that we have that is respectful workplace policy focuses mostly, not entirely, but mostly on staff. There is some minor issues that deal with the general public, but mostly it's staff, and it's also a policy. So my question to administration on this response is whether we can have this policy come back to council for a more extensive conversation about where we may go with it. And my thoughts are, of course, moving this into a bylaw so that there is some teeth to the rules that are in place. Is this a situation where you would like a notice of motion to bring this back for review?
Mr. Legore?
To you, Mr. Mayor, should serve notice of motion and then bring it back to council.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. 15.2, administrative inquiry response, highway littering signs.
Your Worship, I have a couple of questions / comments. Sorry, Mike?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, yeah, thank you very much, administration. So just for the public's knowledge, this just has to do with installing signage along some of the major roadways, such as Highway 1 and Highway 17, indicating that there's a fine for littering. So one question I have is, so could we, I believe that the fine for littering from a vehicle, for instance, is double what it is just when you're walking around. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the fine for littering out of a vehicle was about $1,500, I believe. So I just wanted to find out if like that's what would be reflected. I'd rather, you know, like the higher the fine we can put on there, the better, just to kind of scare people essentially. And then the other question I had is if we could possibly look at just putting up, you know, a few littering signs within the town as well. Like, you know, especially like in problem places like, you know, like there's those parking lots where, you know, people sit in their vehicles and just kind of dump stuff out. Thank you. That's all I wanted to comment on or ask about.
Thank you. Administration, did you have that? Did you get that from Councillor Montgomery or Mr. Simpson? Sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The sign that, like, of course, council asked for this to have littering signs placed on 817 and Highway 1. We needed to get Alberta Transportation's approval. We're going to have to put them up, et cetera, in the right spots. But the sign, the maximum is $750. It's right on that sign that will be going up. Is that what you were speaking about as far as the penalty or fine?
Yeah, I believe the fine is $750 normally, but then isn't it about $1,500 if you're littering from a vehicle?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. So I was under the impression it was around there if you're littering. It's different than if you're littering from a vehicle as opposed to just, you know, walking along and littering. So I just wanted to find out if you would be putting this particular sign with that fine, or if you would be putting the one that's like for littering from a vehicle, essentially.
I will follow up with that to see what sign can be put up on particularly on the two roads that are controlled by Alberta Transportation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. That brings us to 15 points for administrative inquiry response regarding lights on George Freeman Trail. Any comments on that from council?
Is your microphone on, Mr. Mayor?
No, sorry. So we're on 15.3, administrative inquiry response regarding the lights on George Freeman Trail. Any comments on that and what you see in front of you?
I would just like to say, Your Worship, may I speak?
Yes.
I would just like to say thank you to administration for the breakdown of the lights on George Freeman Trail. I have noticed, especially in the winter time and in the early spring before we do the time change, that it is quite dark along that on the west side when you're walking along the fence. And I really appreciate this because I think it puts it into context. And I would like to bring this up in the future so that this is not lost, because I think this is an important breakdown that perhaps we could do this in a 2 or 3 possibly even a 5-year plan, and take a look at some nice options for using that as part of our ring road around Strathmore and highlighting it for the future. So I just very much thank administration for doing this and hope that it doesn't become lost.
Thank you. 15.4, administrative inquiry response concerning economic development, marketing, and advertising. Any comments on that? What you saw presented to us? Councillor
I just wanted to say thank you very much, administration, for this information. I know there's some people out there that we're looking forward to getting this, so thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Montgomery. And I think that brings us to the conclusion of our evening together. Oh, sorry, I forgot that. Totally forgot that, Deborah. Deborah has some for us.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 3 more administrative inquiries. They're all from Councillor Montgomery. The first one is, prior to the construction of the new town hall, there was a public bulletin board in the Kinsman parking lot. Is there any spots in town that the town could look at setting up new bulletin boards for the public? The second administrative inquiry is, I was contacted by a resident who has wondered why we are marking tires in Strathaven, presumably due to the 72-hour rule for moving vehicles. While we and other levels of government are advising people to stay home and avoid unnecessary travel, is there something that can be done to account for the fact that people are staying home more and keeping their vehicles parked longer as a result of our request to do so, such as relaxing the 72-hour rule for a period of time? And the third request is, can administration please report on if there are any external groups or bodies that provide ratings or assessments regarding the construction of new homes and funding thereof?
That's all of them? Thank you. And that brings us to a motion for adjournment. Councillor Corbeil has a motion
I
to...
move we adjourn.
Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn at 10:07 from Councillor Corbeil. And all in favor? And we are